Red emergency lights painted everything in shades of blood. Rebecca Stone gripped the armrest of her command chair as another explosion rocked the New Horizon. 15,000 colonists were screaming somewhere in the lower decks, and she could do nothing but watch their dreams of a new home burn around them. Hull breach on Deck 7, her first officer David Okonkwo reported, his dark fingers dancing across the tactical display. They're cutting through the cargo bay doors. Rebecca had seen combat before, back during the Mars Rebellion, but this was different. Those had been humans fighting humans. These things boarding her ship were something else entirely. The Druvan looked like giant mantises crossed with armored beetles, and they moved through her corridors like a plague. "Send the distress call again," she ordered. "All channels maximum power." David's expression said everything. They both knew nobody would come. Humans were new to the galactic community, barely 3 years since first contact. The established species treated them like children playing with toys they didn't understand. But regulations were regulations, and Rebecca followed them even when hope was dead. The distress signal pulsed out into the void, a simple mathematical pattern followed by coordinates and a plea for help. Standard galactic protocol, taught to them by the very species who would ignore it. Across the sector, at a Galactic Trade Council monitoring station, a bird-like creature named Teelith noticed the signal. Her feathers ruffled with what might have been amusement as she showed it to her colleagues. "Another human vessel in distress," she chirped, her translator rendering the sounds into standard galactic. "The soft-worlders are crying again." Her companion, a bulky reptilian with scales that shifted colors, huffed with laughter. What did they expect? Sending colony ships through raider territory without proper escorts. Primitive thinking from primitive minds. "Should we log it?" Teelith asked, already knowing the answer. "Log it as received and ignored. By the time anyone responds, they'll be dead or enslaved. Perhaps it will teach the other humans a lesson about galactic reality." They returned to their games, dismissing 15,000 human lives as easily as one might swat an insect. Back on the New Horizon, reality was far from gentle. Commander Drusk, leader of the Druvan raiding party, clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as his warriors poured through the breached hull. Humans were supposed to be easy prey, soft creatures from a soft world, with minimal natural weapons and fragile bodies. His information said they broke easily. The first boarding team learned differently. They scuttled into the cargo bay expecting cowering civilians. Instead, they found David Okonkwo and 30 colonists armed with whatever they could grab. Tools became weapons, cargo loaders became battering rams, and the humans fought with a fury that shocked the raiders. A Druvan warrior lunged at a young woman holding a welding torch. She didn't run. She didn't freeze. She stepped into the attack and burned through his faceplates, the creature's screams echoing through the bay as it collapsed. David himself fought with brutal efficiency, a metal pipe in his hands moving like a sword. He'd been special forces before joining the colony mission, and those skills came flooding back. A Druvan's exoskeleton was tough, but joints were joints. Knees bent backwards when struck hard enough. Eyes burst when stabbed precisely enough. "Fall back to checkpoint Beta," he shouted, and the humans moved as one. Not a panicked retreat, but a tactical withdrawal, covering each other, dragging their wounded, leaving improvised traps in their wake. Commander Drusk watched the feeds with growing concern. His warriors were dying, not all of them, but enough. Humans weren't supposed to fight like this. They were supposed to be weak, frightened, easy to break. "Send reinforcement teams," he ordered, "and use the stun weapons. I want them alive for the slave markets." The battle intensified. Druvan flooded the corridors in greater numbers, their technology superior, their weapons more advanced. But for every human that fell, they took 2 raiders with them. A doctor named James Park, who had never held a weapon in his life, strangled a Druvan warrior with a medical tube when it tried to enter the infirmary. A technical officer named Nina Volkov reprogrammed maintenance drones into mobile explosives that tore through raider formations. Rebecca watched it all from the bridge, coordinating their desperate defense while sending the distress signal again and again. Her tactical officer estimated they had maybe 6 hours before the raiders overwhelmed them through sheer numbers. "Captain," David's voice crackled over the comm, "we're holding Deck 7, but they're cutting through the reinforced doors to Deck 6. That's where the children are sheltering." Rebecca felt ice in her veins. "Hold them, David, whatever it takes." "Yes, ma'am." Until the end. The words hung in the air like an epitaph. Rebecca looked at the silent communications panel, at the distress signal pulsing out into an uncaring universe, and made her peace with death. They would make the raiders pay for every meter, every life, every drop of blood. In the cargo bay, David rallied his people for another stand. They were exhausted, wounded, running low on improvised weapons. But they were human, and humans didn't surrender. Not when their children were at stake. Not when everything they'd worked for was being torn apart. Commander Drusk increased the assault, confident that numbers would eventually prevail. He didn't understand Deathworlders yet. Didn't understand that humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. That they climbed to the top of a food chain packed with predators. That they learned to hunt in packs, to plan, to never stop fighting even when wounded. The New Horizons distress signal continued its lonely broadcast, ignored by species who thought they understood the galaxy. None of them knew that far away, on a planet of crushing gravity and lethal weather, humanity had heard the call, and humanity was coming. Admiral Patricia Hayes was in the shower when the world changed. The hot water was one of her few luxuries, a moment of peace in a job that never really stopped. That peace ended when her emergency implant sent a spike of electricity through her nervous system, the kind reserved for only the worst situations. She was dressed and moving before her conscious mind caught up. By the time she reached Earth Defense Command's Operations Center, water still dripping from her short gray hair, the situation display showed her everything she needed to know. New Horizon, colony vessel attacked in Sector 772, her intelligence officer reported. Druvan raiders, multiple ships, boarding action in progress. Patricia's jaw tightened. She knew that ship. Had attended its launch ceremony, shaken hands with Rebecca Stone, promised those families they would be protected. And now some insect pirates thought they could butcher humans and face no consequences. How long ago was the distress call sent? 42 minutes, Admiral. The Galactic Council monitoring station logged it as received and classified it as low priority. Patricia's hand slammed down on the communications panel. Get me Ambassador Cross now. While she waited, she pulled up the fleet deployment screen. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet was conducting exercises near Jupiter. 47 warships, including 3 carrier-class vessels. They could reach Sector 772 in 36 hours if they pushed the engines. Ambassador Richard Cross appeared on the screen, his expression already grim. He was at the Galactic Council headquarters, a massive space station where 100 species pretended to care about peace and justice. I heard, he said before Patricia could speak. Counselor Tillith herself confirmed they received the distress call and chose to ignore it. Then she just declared war on humanity. Richard shook his head. Not yet. They don't understand what they've done. To them, this is just another raid on primitives. But Patricia, if you deploy the fleet, if you show them what Earth's military really looks like, there's no going back. We've been hiding our strength for 3 years. I'm done hiding, Patricia said flatly. Those are our people dying while aliens laugh. Deploy the fleet or I resign and do it anyway. Richard was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Do it, I'll handle the political fallout. Make them remember this day, Admiral. The call ended. Patricia turned to her operations staff, and her voice carried through the command center like thunder. All hands, battle stations. Activate 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Authorization Hayes Alpha 7. Combat deployment, maximum burn, Sector 772. Send the message. Earth protects its own. Throughout the solar system, ships that had been marked as cargo haulers and research vessels suddenly revealed their true nature. Armor plating slid into place. Weapons bays opened. Railgun batteries that could punch through asteroids charged to full power. Nuclear-pumped lasers capable of cutting a moon in half ran system checks. Commander Laura Briggs received her orders aboard the carrier Valiant and felt a cold smile cross her face. She'd been a fighter pilot before taking command, had flown against separatist forces during the Jupiter Wars. She knew what human weapons could do. The galaxy was about to learn. At the Galactic Council headquarters, alarms started screaming. Counselor Presh, an aquatic species whose homeworld had gravity 1/3 that of Earth, was reviewing trade agreements when his security chief burst into the chamber. Counselor, the humans are moving military assets, multiple warships heavily armed, heading out system at unprecedented speeds. Presh's gill slits fluttered with confusion. Warships? Humans don't have warships. They have colony vessels and some system defense platforms. We were wrong, sir. Very wrong. Intelligence is revising Earth's threat assessment as we speak. Across the council chambers, similar scenes played out. The humans, who everyone thought were barely space-capable, were deploying a fleet that made several established species nervous. Ships accelerated at rates that would turn most alien crew into paste from the gravity. Weapon signatures suggested firepower levels considered excessive even by military powers. Ambassador Cross walked into an emergency council session with his head held high. 100 species stared at him, some curious, most hostile. They didn't like surprises, and Earth had just delivered a massive one. Supreme Counselor Orath, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal matrix, spoke first. Ambassador Cross, your species is mobilizing military forces. Explain. 15,000 humans sent a distress call, Richard replied calmly. Your monitoring station received it and chose to do nothing. So Earth will do something instead. You risk war over a single ship? Counselor Presh demanded. Richard's smile was cold. You risk war by ignoring human lives. We asked to join your community. We followed your protocols. We sent the proper distress signals. And you laughed while our people died. So yes, Counselor, we're coming to save them. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with our fleet. This is unacceptable, another counselor shouted. You cannot deploy military forces without council approval. Watch us. The session dissolved into chaos, but Richard barely noticed. He was watching the tactical feed from Earth Defense Command. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet had cleared Jupiter's orbit and was accelerating hard, their fusion drives burning like new stars. 47 warships built in secret shipyards. 47 hammers forged in the fires of a death world. 47 promises that humanity would never again beg aliens for help. Commander Laura Briggs stood in the Valiant's Flight Operations Center, watching her crews prepare for battle. 300 fighters, each one piloted by someone who grew up in Earth's punishing gravity. Pilots who could handle G-forces that would kill most aliens. Pilots who trained in simulators that assumed every enemy was faster and better armed. All wings report ready, her air boss announced. Laura nodded. Good, when we get there, I want every raider ship crippled. Not destroyed unless necessary. We want prisoners. We want the galaxy to understand what happens when you touch humans. Similar preparations happened across the fleet. Marines checked their powered armor, weapons designed to fight in environments that would crush normal soldiers. Railgun crews loaded tungsten penetrators that could punch through most known shield technologies. Medical bays prepared for casualties because humans knew war always had a cost. Admiral Patricia Hayes watched it all from Earth Defense Command, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about saving one ship. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity demanded respect. That Deathworlders didn't beg for mercy or wait for permission. They took action. The fleet punched through space at velocities that made sensor officers double-check their readings. 36 hours to cross distances that normally took 3 days. The humans pushed their ships and themselves beyond what galactic species considered safe, beyond what physics said was reasonable. But humans had always been unreasonable. It was how they survived. And now the galaxy would learn what happened when you made enemies of survivors. Blood made the deck plates slippery. David Okonkwo didn't care anymore. His boots found grip where they needed to. Muscle memory from 1,000 training exercises guiding each step. The Druvan warrior in front of him was bigger, stronger, and armored with natural chitin that could stop small arms fire. None of that mattered when David's improvised spear found the joint between head and thorax. Checkpoint Beta is lost, he spoke into his comm unit, voice steady despite the chaos. Falling back to Checkpoint Gamma. We need more bodies here. Around him, colonists who'd been farmers and teachers and artists 2 days ago fought like demons. Nina Volkov, who'd designed water reclamation systems before the attack, now built death traps from civilian equipment. Her latest creation was elegant in its simplicity. Maintenance drones programmed to fly into Druvan faceplates and explode. How many more can you make? David asked her between attacks. 20, maybe 30 if I stripped the environmental systems. Nina's hands were shaking, but her voice was firm. But David, we're running out of everything. Weapons, medical supplies, time, he knew. They all knew. But giving up wasn't in human nature. In the infirmary, Dr. James Park worked on a wounded colonist while keeping one eye on the sealed doors. He'd killed a Druvan earlier, choked the life out of it when it tried to reach his patients. His hands, trained to heal, had discovered they could also destroy. The psychological weight of that would come later. Right now, survival was all that mattered. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, huddled in the corner of the infirmary. Her name was Amy, and she watched James work with wide eyes. "Are the monsters going to eat us?" she asked quietly. James knelt beside her, forcing a smile. "No, sweetheart. We won't let them. My dad said humans are tough. He said we come from a scary planet. Your dad is right. Earth is very tough. It made us tough too." What James didn't tell her was just how tough. Didn't explain that Earth's gravity was nearly twice what most spacefaring species considered normal, that Earth's atmosphere had oxygen levels that were mildly toxic to many aliens, that Earth's weather patterns included storms that could level cities, temperature swings that killed the unprepared, and natural disasters that made other planets look gentle. Across the galaxy, in the Galactic Council's Xenobiology Division, researchers were frantically pulling up Earth's classification data. What they found made their blood run cold. Those that had blood anyway. "This can't be right," a young researcher named Kelvin muttered, his tentacles trembling as he read. "Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. That's the same category as quarantine zones." His supervisor, an elderly being named Othis, felt fear for the first time in decades. Class 12 means the planet actively tries to kill its inhabitants. Nothing that evolved there should be capable of space travel. The trauma would be too severe. "But humans did it anyway," Kelvin whispered. "They crawled out of hell and built spaceships." The data painted a terrifying picture. Earth had predators at every level of its food chain. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, creatures that could chase prey until it literally died from exhaustion. They had forward-facing eyes, the mark of a predator. They had throwing arms that could launch projectiles with lethal force. They could consume and digest things that would poison most species. But the really terrifying part was their psychology. Humans bonded with other species, turning natural enemies into companions. They had something called spite that made them continue fighting even when victory was impossible. They told stories about never surrendering, about going down swinging, about taking the enemy with them. Deathworld species were rare in the galaxy for a reason. Most never made it to space. Those that did usually destroyed themselves in wars too terrible to survive. But humans were different. They'd survived everything their planet threw at them and decided to reach for the stars anyway. Back on the New Horizon, Commander Drusk was learning these lessons the hard way. His boarding party had started with 200 warriors. He'd expected to lose maybe 10. Instead, 63 were dead, and another 40 were too injured to fight. "How are they doing this?" he screamed at his lieutenant. "They have no weapons, no training, no proper soldiers." The lieutenant, whose mandibles bore scars from a colonist's makeshift blade, clicked nervously. "Commander, I think we made a mistake. These humans, they don't stop." "We wounded one, stabbed it through the abdomen. It kept fighting for another 10 minutes before dying. Another one lost an arm and used the stump to beat my squad mate to death." Drusk wanted to call it lies, but the video feeds didn't lie. Humans fought with a savagery that shocked even a raider who'd seen 100 battles. They used everything as weapons. They set traps that were creative and cruel. They protected their young with a ferocity that bordered on insanity. In one corridor, 3 colonists held off 15 Druvan warriors using nothing but fire extinguishers and their bare hands. The extinguishers created a fog that confused Druvan sensors, and in that fog humans became ghosts. Silent, efficient, lethal. Rebecca Stone watched the defense from her bridge, her respect for her people growing with every report. They weren't soldiers. They were just humans being what humans had always been, survivors. "Captain, they're massing for another push on Deck 6, her tactical officer reported. "David's people can't hold much longer." Rebecca made a decision she'd hoped to avoid. Evacuate Deck 6 through the emergency passages. Then seal it and vent the atmosphere. It was brutal but necessary. Better to sacrifice one deck than let the raiders reach the children's shelter. As the deck emptied of air, Druvan warriors died gasping, their exoskeletons no protection against the void. But it was a temporary victory. The raiders had reinforcements. The humans did not. Nina Volkov worked on her last batch of improvised explosives, tears streaming down her face. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. She'd been awake for 30 hours, fighting and building and fighting again. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind wouldn't let her stop. "This is it," she told David. "After this, I've got nothing left." David put a hand on her shoulder. "You've done enough. More than enough. When the end comes, we'll face it standing. Do you think anyone heard our distress call? Honestly? No. But maybe Earth will find out what happened here. Maybe they'll make sure it never happens again. They didn't know that Earth already knew. That 47 warships were burning through space at impossible speeds. That humanity had heard the cry of its children and responded with fury. All they knew was that they were human, and humans didn't surrender. Not when their families were at stake. Not when everything they'd worked for hung in the balance. Not when death itself came knocking. Commander Drusk prepared for a final assault, throwing everything he had at the remaining human positions. He would win eventually. Numbers always won, but the cost would haunt him forever. Space rippled like disturbed water. Reality tore open at 47 points simultaneously, and through those wounds in the universe came ships that radiated purpose. The Third Expeditionary Fleet had arrived, and with it came humanity's answer to those who thought humans were prey. Commander Drusk was savoring his victory when the alarm started. The New Horizon was his. The humans broken and scattered through the lower decks. 70% casualties for the colonists, but they'd stopped fighting. Finally understood they couldn't win. Then his sensor officer made a sound that translated roughly to pure terror. Commander, multiple contacts, 40+ vessels emerging from FTL at the system's edge. Drusk's mandibles clicked with confusion. The Council sending peacekeepers? Good. They can witness our prize. Commander, these aren't Council ships. They're broadcasting human identification codes. For a moment, Drusk couldn't process the words. Humans didn't have fleets. They barely had proper starships. His information was clear on this. But then his main screen filled with images of the approaching vessels, and his confidence shattered like glass. These weren't colony ships. These were warships, angular and deadly, their hulls painted in colors that absorbed sensor scans. Each one bristled with weapons that made his raider vessels look like toys. And they were accelerating toward him at speeds that should have been impossible. Broadcast to them, Drusk ordered, forcing his voice to stay steady. Tell them this vessel is now Druvan property under salvage rights. They should leave before there's trouble. His communications officer tried. The response came back in clear galactic standard, but the voice behind it was cold enough to freeze helium. This is Captain Andrew Foster of Earth Defense Force vessel Indomitable. You have 30 seconds to release the New Horizon and surrender your ships or we will open fire. There will be no second warning. Drusk laughed, the sound harsh and clicking. Look at their ships. They're built for cargo, not combat. This is a bluff. He ordered his fleet to battle positions. 23 ships against 47. The numbers favored the humans, but the Druvan had been raiding these sectors for decades. They knew how to fight. Weapons charged, his tactical officer reported. Waiting for your command. Drusk watched the timer count down. 30 seconds, 20, 10. He smiled as it hit 0. Fire. Druvan ships unleashed plasma bolts and energy lances, standard weapons that had served them well for years. The attack streaked across the void toward the human fleet, and for a moment, Drusk thought he saw the humans' shields flicker. Then the human ships returned fire. Captain Andrew Foster, aboard the Indomitable, gave a single order. Weapons free. Show them Earth's fury. The human fleet opened up with weapons that made galactic military doctrine look like ancient history. Railguns, built to fire tungsten penetrators at a significant fraction of light speed. Not energy weapons that could be dispersed by shields, but solid matter that followed the old laws of physics. Mass times velocity equals impact, and human ships had both in terrifying quantities. The first Druvan ship to die never knew what hit it. A tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole punched through its shields like they didn't exist, through its armor like tissue paper, and out the other side. The ship split in two, its reactor going critical, and the explosion lit up the darkness. Then the rest of the railguns spoke. Drusk watched in horror as his fleet died. Shields meant nothing, armor meant nothing. Evasive maneuvers barely helped because the humans didn't aim where you were, they aimed where you would be. His raiders were dying and they couldn't even scratch the human vessels. Return fire, concentrate all weapons on their lead ship. He screamed. Druvan plasma bolts hammered into the Indomitable's shields. They held. Human shield technology, built to withstand Earth's radiation belts and solar storms, laughed at weapons designed for normal space combat. Commander Laura Briggs, aboard the carrier Valiant, watched the battle with professional satisfaction. Launch all fighters. I want those raider ships disabled, not destroyed. We need prisoners. 300 human fighters poured into space, each one a marvel of engineering built for pilots who could handle G-forces that would kill most species. They moved through the battlefield like angry hornets, their weapons precise and devastating. A Druvan ship tried to run. Human fighters bracketed it, their weapons taking out engines and weapon systems with surgical strikes. Not killing, just removing the ability to fight or flee. Drusk realized the truth with a sinking feeling in his gut. The humans weren't trying to destroy his fleet. They were capturing it, like he'd planned to capture the New Horizon, but with efficiency that spoke of vast military experience. All ships, emergency jump, scatter pattern, he ordered desperately. Too late. Human weapons had already destroyed jump drives across his fleet. 8 ships managed to escape, flickering out of reality in panicked jumps to random coordinates. 4 others tried to surrender, broadcasting every protocol they knew. The remaining 11 ships, including Drusk's flagship, found themselves surrounded by human vessels that could kill them any time but chose not to. It was more terrifying than dying. Aboard the New Horizon, Rebecca Stone felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the battle. Human ships were out there, real ships with real weapons destroying the raiders who'd killed her people. "Open a channel," she ordered, her voice breaking. "New Horizon to human fleet. Thank God you're here. Thank God." Captain Foster's voice came back, and it was gentle now, the cold fury replaced by compassion. "New Horizon, this is Foster. Hold on. We're sending medical teams and engineers. You're safe now. You're going home." David Okonkwo, still standing in a corridor painted with blood both human and alien, heard the announcement and finally let himself collapse. Nina Volkov dropped her tools and sobbed. Dr. James Park held little Amy and whispered that the monsters were gone. The battle was over in 18 minutes. The Druvan raider fleet, which had terrorized the outer sectors for years, was effectively destroyed. 23 ships engaged, 11 captured, 4 surrendered, 8 escaped. 0 human ships damaged. Drusk sat in his command chair, watching human marines in powered armor board his ship. They moved with terrifying purpose, their weapons always ready, their eyes scanning for threats. When they reached his bridge, he expected execution. Instead, the lead marine simply said, "You're under arrest for piracy, attempted murder, and violation of Galactic Council peace accords. You will be held for trial. You're not going to kill me?" The marine's smile was cold. "No, you're going to face justice. You're going to spend the rest of your life remembering that you attacked humans, and then you're going to watch as we make sure nobody ever makes that mistake again." Admiral Patricia Hayes, watching from Earth Defense Command, allowed herself a small smile. The message had been sent. The galaxy now knew that humans protected their own, that Deathworlders didn't beg for mercy or wait for permission. They took action, and heaven help anyone who stood in their way. Across the sector, 100 species received the battle recordings. They watched human ships move with impossible speed. They saw weapons that ignored shields. They witnessed a military capability that had been hidden for 3 years, and they understood that humanity had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The age of underestimating humans was over. 300 human bodies floated in space, carefully preserved in emergency stasis pods. The New Horizon's cargo bay had become a temporary morgue, and Admiral Patricia Hayes stood among the dead with her head bowed. These people had come to the stars seeking a better future. Instead, they'd found terror and death while the galaxy watched and did nothing. She would make sure their sacrifice meant something. Rebecca Stone stood beside her, one arm in a medical sling, her face bearing the scars of close combat. Around them, human marines stood honor guard, their powered armor painted with the names of the fallen. "They fought well," Rebecca said quietly. "Farmers, teachers, engineers. They became warriors because they had no choice." Patricia nodded. "And the galaxy needs to understand what that means, what it costs when they ignore human lives." 2 hours later, every communications array in the human fleet locked onto every major channel in known space. What followed would be remembered for generations. Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. Behind her floated the New Horizon, its hull scarred and broken. Around it hung the captured Druvan ships already being stripped of weapons and technology. "I am Admiral Patricia Hayes of Earth Defense Force," she began, her voice calm but carrying an edge that made listeners nervous. 48 hours ago, 15,000 human colonists sent a distress call. They followed every protocol. They used proper channels. They asked for help according to laws the Galactic Council itself created. She paused, letting that sink in. The Council received their call and chose to do nothing. They logged it as low priority. They laughed at human suffering. They decided our lives didn't matter. On the Council headquarters station, emergency meetings were already starting. Councillor Presh watched the broadcast with growing dread, his gill slits fluttering rapidly. 300 humans died while you debated whether we deserved help, Patricia continued. 300 people who trusted that galactic civilization meant something. They were wrong. You taught us that we can only trust ourselves. She gestured, and the camera panned across the battlefield. Debris from Druvan ships glittered in the starlight. Human fighters patrolled the perimeter like sharks. So here's what happens now. Earth will no longer ask permission to protect its citizens. We will no longer wait for Council approval to defend ourselves. Any attack on human vessels will be met with overwhelming force. Any species that harms our people will answer to our fleet. Ambassador Richard Cross watched the broadcast from his office, a slight smile on his face. They'd planned this message together, each word carefully chosen. Not a declaration of war, but a statement of independence. Humanity was done being the new kid who accepted whatever scraps the established powers offered. Some of you are wondering about our military capabilities, Patricia said, and now her smile was sharp enough to cut steel. You've spent 3 years thinking humans were primitive, that we barely understood space travel. That was our choice. We let you underestimate us because we were learning, watching, preparing. The display behind her lit up with specifications, ship classes, weapon systems, fleet deployments. Nothing classified, but enough to make military strategists across the galaxy revise their threat assessments upward. Way upward. Earth is a Class 12 death world. Some of you know what that means. For those who don't, it means our planet tried to kill us every single day of our evolution. We survived predators that made your worst nightmares look tame. We endured weather that destroyed civilizations. We climbed to the top of a food chain that would have broken most species before they developed tools. On a water world named Tethys, Councillor Presh finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. Deathworld species were rare because most never survived long enough to reach space. Those that did were typically isolated and avoided. But humans hadn't isolated themselves. They'd integrated into galactic society, learned from it, adapted to it, all while hiding just how dangerous they really were. We don't want war, Patricia continued, her tone softening slightly. Humans prefer peace. We'd rather explore, trade, learn from our neighbors. But we will not beg for the right to exist. We will not watch our people die while others debate our worth. From this day forward, humanity stands on its own. She looked directly into the camera, and her next words carried the weight of Earth's history behind them. To the species who respect life and honor their treaties, we offer friendship and cooperation. To those who prey on the weak, who laugh at suffering, who think compassion is weakness, we offer this warning. Stay away from humans. We protect our own, and we have very long memories. The broadcast ended, but its echoes would ripple through galactic society for months. Within hours, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Supreme Councillor Orath, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated light, called for order as arguments exploded across the chamber. This is unprecedented, Councillor Tillith chirped, her feathers ruffled in distress. They cannot simply declare independence from Council oversight. They just did, Ambassador Richard Cross replied calmly. And unless you plan to enforce Council authority with military force, I suggest you accept reality. Is that a threat? Another councillor demanded. It's a fact. Earth has 47 warships in that sector alone. How many does the Council have? And more importantly, how many of your species are willing to die trying to force humanity back into submission? Silence fell across the chamber. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. The Council's authority rested on mutual agreement, not military might. Most member species maintained minimal defense forces, relying on collective security and the assumption that civilization had moved past large-scale warfare. Humans had no such assumptions. They'd brought their Deathworld survival instincts to the stars, and those instincts included being very, very good at violence when necessary. What do you want? Orath asked finally. Richard smiled. formal apology and reparations for the families of the deceased. Full council membership with security guarantees, and the Druvan raiders tried at the Interstellar Court for their crimes. That's all? That's all? We're not interested in conquest or domination. We just want to be treated as equals instead of primitives. Is that too much to ask? It wasn't, and they all knew it. Over the next week, treaties were revised, apologies were issued, and humanity took its place as a full member of galactic civilization. But the terms had changed. Humans weren't supplicants anymore, they were partners. Dangerous, capable partners who demanded respect. In a hospital aboard the Indomitable, Rebecca Stone recovered from her wounds and prepared to meet with her surviving colonists. 300 were dead, but 12,700 lived. They would continue to their colony world, but things would be different now. David Okonkwo visited her, his own injuries healing slowly. "Do you think they'll remember?" he asked. "The council, the other species. Do you think they'll remember what happened here?" Rebecca thought about the 300 bodies in stasis, about farmers who became warriors, about the distress call that went ignored, about the fleet that came anyway. "They'll remember," she said with certainty, "and they'll never make this mistake again." She was right. Across the galaxy, species updated their threat assessments, revised their defense doctrines, and made a single notation in their diplomatic files: "Do not provoke the humans." 6 months had passed since the New Horizon incident, and the galaxy looked different. Rebecca Stone stood on the surface of her colony world, watching the sun set over fields that were finally being planted. The planet had no name yet, just a catalog number, but already people were calling it New Hope. It seemed fitting. Behind her, the colony's main settlement was taking shape. Prefab buildings rose alongside structures built from local materials. Children played in streets that were still being paved, and surrounding it all, silent and vigilant, were defense platforms that made very clear this settlement would never be defenseless again. "Governor Stone," a voice called, and Rebecca turned to see David Okonkwo approaching. He wore a uniform now, not civilian clothes, head of colonial security, a position that didn't exist before the attack. "The memorial is ready." They walked together to the colony's center where a simple monument had been erected. 300 names carved into black stone, each one representing a person who'd come to the stars seeking peace and found war instead. The inscription at the base read, "They fought so others could live. We will remember." Rebecca touched the stone gently, her fingers tracing names she knew by heart. Then she turned to face the assembled colonists. 12,700 survivors, all of them changed by what they'd endured. "We came here to build something new," she said. "A place where our children could grow up free from Earth's problems, from war and conflict. We learned that peace isn't free. It has to be defended. So we'll build our colony, we'll plant our crops, we'll raise our families, but we'll never forget the cost. And we'll never be helpless again." Across the galaxy at Earth Defense Command, Admiral Patricia Hayes reviewed reports that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Human vessels now patrolled sectors that had been lawless for decades. Piracy was down 70%. Species that had preyed on weaker civilizations were suddenly finding new employment or facing justice at the Interstellar Court. Her assistant, a young officer named Troy Walsh, brought her the latest diplomatic summary. "Admiral, we've received 3 more requests for mutual defense treaties. That brings the total to 17 species who want formal military alliances with Earth." Patricia nodded, scanning the list. Most were smaller civilizations that had been bullied by stronger neighbors for generations. Now they saw humanity as protection, as someone who actually followed through on promises to defend the innocent. "Approve them all, but make sure they understand the terms. We'll defend them from aggression, but we won't support conquest or oppression. We're not building an empire." "Some council members are calling it an empire anyway," Troy pointed out. "Let them. Words don't matter. Actions do. As long as we keep our word and protect those who need protection, history will judge us fairly." At the Galactic Council headquarters, Supreme Counselor Orath was learning to navigate a new political reality. The humans had forced changes he'd thought impossible. Council sessions now required actual action instead of endless debate. Distress calls were answered promptly. Species couldn't hide behind bureaucracy when convenient. Ambassador Richard Cross had become a pivotal figure in council politics. his voice carrying weight that 3 years of gentle diplomacy never achieved. Respect, it turned out, required more than politeness. It required the willingness to back up words with action. The Druvan sovereignty has collapsed, Orath reported during a private meeting. Without their raider fleets, they can't maintain their economy. Dozens of worlds they terrorized are seeking reparations. Richard nodded. Good. Pirates shouldn't profit from their crimes. But their civilian population is suffering. They need humanitarian aid. Then the Council should provide it. Humanity will contribute, but we won't let them rebuild their military capabilities. The Druvan people can have a future, but not as raiders. It was a hard line but fair, and Orath had learned that humans specialized in being both. They could be compassionate and ruthless, often in the same conversation. Deathworld thinking, where survival meant being adaptable. In a military academy on Mars, Commander Laura Briggs taught new tactics to officers from a dozen species. Her classroom was filled with aliens who'd come to learn from Earth's combat doctrine, to understand how humans fought so effectively. The key is accepting casualties, she explained, and saw several students flinch. Most galactic species see warfare as a last resort, something to be avoided at almost any cost. Humans understand that sometimes the cost of not fighting is higher than the cost of war. When we commit to battle, we commit fully. A student from an insectoid species raised a limb. But doesn't that make you mindless killers? No, it makes us effective defenders. There's a difference between aggression and protection. Humans rarely start wars, but we're very good at finishing them. She pulled up footage from the New Horizon battle, showing how human ships moved and fought. Notice we didn't destroy everything. We disabled enemy vessels when possible, took prisoners, minimized casualties. But we didn't hesitate either. When the time came to fight, we fought. The students watched in silence, understanding dawning in alien eyes. Humanity's military success wasn't just about technology or training. It was about mindset, about being willing to do what was necessary while still maintaining honor and ethics. Back on New Hope Colony, night had fallen. Rebecca Stone sat in her new office reviewing supply manifests and construction schedules. Normal governor work, the kind of boring administrative task she'd dreamed about during the attack. A message notification appeared on her screen. Official seal of Earth Defense Force. She opened it, curious. It was from Patricia Hayes. Governor Stone, I wanted to inform you that the last of the Druvan raiders who attacked your ship have been sentenced. The ringleaders, including Commander Drusk, received life imprisonment. Others received lesser sentences based on their involvement. Justice has been served as much as it can be for those we lost. Rebecca felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd carried for months. It didn't bring back the dead, but it mattered. The galaxy had learned that human lives had value, that crimes against humans had consequences. She composed a reply. Thank you, Admiral. For everything. For coming when no one else would. For showing the galaxy that we matter. New Hope Colony stands as proof that your actions saved lives and changed the future. Patricia's response came quickly. We protect our own, Governor. Always. If you ever need help again, Earth will answer. But I don't think you'll need it. You've proven humans can handle anything the galaxy throws at them. In a bar on a distant trading station, a group of alien merchants discussed business over drinks. The topic turned to shipping routes and which species to trust with cargo. Use human carriers, one of them said firmly. They're more expensive, but their ships always arrive. Pirates won't touch them. Why not? Another asked. Because attacking a human ship means Earth sends warships. Real warships, not patrol boats. Nobody's stupid enough to risk that. Similar conversations happened across the galaxy. Humanity had become synonymous with reliability, strength, and most importantly, follow-through. When humans made promises, they kept them. When humans made threats, they meant them. A year after the New Horizon incident, President Sarah Martinez of Earth gave a speech to the United Nations. The same chamber where 4 years earlier, they debated whether to make first contact with aliens at all. We entered the galactic community with hope and optimism, she said. We believed civilization meant cooperation and mutual support. We learned that reality is more complicated. But we also learned that we can handle that complexity. Humanity hasn't just survived in space, we've thrived. We've made friends, defended allies, and established ourselves as a force for stability and justice. She paused, looking at the representatives from nations that had once fought each other, now united in reaching for the stars. But we must never forget the lessons we learned. Peace is precious but not guaranteed. Civilization requires constant effort, and when the choice comes between doing what's easy and doing what's right, we must choose right even when others won't. The speech was broadcast to human colonies across dozens of star systems, to soldiers serving in the fleet, to diplomats negotiating treaties, to children being born under alien suns. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or victims, but as something more complex. They were the species you wanted as friends and feared as enemies, the ones who came when called, who kept their word, who demanded respect but gave it freely to those who earned it. Rebecca Stone, watching the speech from New Hope, smiled. Around her, a city was growing. In the fields, crops were sprouting. In the sky, ships came and went, bringing supplies and new colonists. And orbiting overhead, defense satellites ensured that nobody would ever again mistake human determination for weakness. The galaxy had learned its lesson. When humans sent a distress signal, you answered, not because you feared their warships, though that was wise, but because humanity remembered its friends and its enemies with equal clarity. And in a universe where memory mattered, that made all the difference. The age of underestimating humanity was over. A new age had begun, where humans stood as equals among the stars, respected for their strength and admired for their principles. It was everything they'd hoped for when they first reached for the sky. And it had cost only 300 lives to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. 300 lives that would never be forgotten.
The circular chamber of the Galactic Confederation's High Council gleamed with the soft blue light of holographic displays. 20 council members from different species sat around the massive table, their attention fixed on Commander Vex, who stood at the center. His tall, slender frame cast a long shadow across the polished floor as he gestured to the planet displayed in the air before them. Earth, third planet from a standard G-type star. One natural satellite. Dominant species, humans. Vex's four-fingered hand moved through the hologram, causing it to zoom in on the blue-green world. They have achieved nuclear capability, basic space travel within their solar system, and show rapid advancement in computational technology. High Council member Trell tapped a long finger against the table. Unlike Vex's gray skin, Trell's was a deep purple that darkened when annoyed, as it was doing now. Commander, we have 11 potential threat assessments to complete today. The humans still use chemical rockets. They haven't even colonized their own moon permanently. Trell's secondary eyes blinked impatiently. I propose we classify them as minimal threat potential and move on. Commander Vex stiffened. With respect, Council member, there are unusual patterns in their development. Their theoretical physics advances faster than their applied technology. They imagine things before they can build them. As do many species, Trell replied. Yet most never bridge that gap. Vex moved his hand again, bringing up a new display. Radio signals emanating from Earth. Their communications show unusual characteristics. They broadcast stories about space travel far beyond their capabilities. They imagine technologies they can't possibly create. It's as if. As if what, Commander? Asked Council member Drawl, an elder whose skin had faded to pale blue with age. As if they're rehearsing for a future they'd fully expect to have. Vex finished. I recommend continued close monitoring despite their current technological limitations. Trell rose from his seat, standing at nearly twice Vex's height. He dominated the chamber. The Confederation faces real threats. The Voral expansion at the Outer Rim. The resource crisis in the Bendari sector. We cannot waste precious monitoring resources on a species that might become interesting in a few hundred cycles. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the Council. Resource allocation had become a constant battle in recent cycles, with budget cuts affecting every division of the Confederation's vast bureaucracy. The surveillance stations in the Sol system cost us the equivalent of maintaining a defensive fleet in the Cygnus Arm, added Council member Merrick, their bony crest flexing with concern. Our Strategic Assessment Division recommends reallocating those resources. Vex tried one more time. There's something about their transmissions. Enough, Commander. Trell's voice filled the chamber. We appreciate your diligence, but the decision is made. Earth is classified as minimal threat potential. The surveillance network in that sector will be decommissioned according to schedule. Vex's shoulders dropped slightly, but he maintained his professional composure. As the Council directs. 3 cycles later, Vex stood in the main control room of Monitoring Station Epsilon 12, the largest of the Confederation's surveillance posts, orbiting in the shadow of the gas giant the humans called Jupiter. Technicians moved around him, packing equipment and preparing for the station's shutdown. "Send me the final assessment report before you wipe the systems," Vex instructed Chief Analyst Mori, who nodded her bulbous head. "Already prepared, Commander. Though I must note my team shares your concerns." Her wide-set eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of distress in her species. "We've detected unusual spikes in their quantum physics research transmissions, and their entertainment broadcasts increasingly depict advanced space travel scenarios with surprising technical accuracy." Vex reviewed the report on his console, scrolling through the data. Any direct evidence of technological breakthrough? Nothing conclusive. Their space agencies still struggle with the same chemical propulsion systems. Their attempts at nuclear propulsion remain theoretical. No evidence of artificial gravity or energy shields. Mori hesitated before adding, "But their theoretical models are becoming more sophisticated. There's a mathematical elegance to their recent work that..." "That what?" Vex prompted when she fell silent. "That some of our scientists find impressive," she admitted. "Particularly their approaches to problems from unusual angles. They think differently." Vex saved the report to his personal device. "Make a note of that in the final assessment." "Already done, Commander. But no one will read it." Mori gestured to the emptying control room. "This whole network will go dark in 6 hours. The data archive will be compressed and stored in the central library on Xilaris. No one accesses those archives unless there's a reason. And without monitoring, we'll have no reason," Vex mused. "A perfect circle of ignorance." The final shutdown sequence began around them, systems powering down one by one. Holographic displays flickered and vanished. The hum of processors faded to silence. "It feels wrong," Mori said quietly. 17 cycles of monitoring, ended because of budget cuts. Vex moved to the last active viewing port, gazing at the distant speck that was Earth. "Add one final note to the report, Chief Analyst." "Sir." "Note that Commander Vex officially protests this decision and recommends review in no more than 5 cycles." Mori hesitated. "That will not be well received by the Council." "Nevertheless, make the note." She nodded and added the entry. The report was filed, compressed, and transmitted to the Central Archive on Xilaris, where it would join billions of other reports in the vast data vaults of the Confederation, unread and forgotten. As the last Confederation personnel boarded their transport vessel, automated systems completed the final shutdown sequence. The massive sensor arrays that had monitored Earth's communications for nearly 2 decades powered down. The quantum entanglement communicators that had instantly relayed data across light years fell silent. The stealth field generators that had kept the station hidden from Earth's primitive detection systems ceased functioning. In the darkness of space, the monitoring station became just another piece of orbiting debris, indistinguishable from the countless asteroids and moonlets circling the gas giant. On Earth, in an underground facility beneath the New Mexico desert, a technician looked up from her console with a puzzled expression. "Sir," she called to her supervisor, "that strange signal we've been tracking near Jupiter. It's gone." Her supervisor barely glanced up from his tablet. "Probably just some unusual solar radiation pattern. Make a note in the log and move on." "Yes, sir." She hesitated before adding, "But it was the 3rd signal to disappear this month, all from different points in our outer solar system." "Coincidence," he replied, already walking away, "or equipment malfunction. Run a diagnostic on the deep space array." "Already did, sir. Everything's working perfectly." But her supervisor had already left the room. With a sigh, she made her entry in the log. "Unidentified signal J27, ceased at 3:42 hours. Cause unknown. She couldn't know that she had just witnessed the Confederation abandoning its watch over Earth, nor could she know what that abandonment would mean for humanity's future among the stars. The clock was now ticking on the greatest misjudgment in Confederation history. 10 years passed since the Confederation abandoned their monitoring stations. 10 years of silence during which humanity took an unexpected leap. Admiral James Wilson stood before the massive viewport of Earth's first true starship, the Pathfinder. At 62, his hair had turned completely white, but his eyes still held the sharp intensity that had made him legendary in global military circles. The blue glow of faster-than-light energies reflected off his face as he watched the stars blur. "FTL transition complete, Admiral," reported Captain Bell from her command chair. "All systems nominal. We've successfully reached the Proxima Centauri system." Wilson nodded, maintaining his stoic expression despite the historic moment. Humanity had just completed its first jump beyond the solar system. A journey that should have taken years accomplished in mere hours. "Begin stealth protocols," Wilson ordered. "No active scanning until we've completed passive sweep of the system." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Though this was their first actual interstellar journey, they had trained for years in simulations. Every officer knew the importance of the Admiral's standing order: remain undetected at all costs. "Sir," asked Lieutenant Parker, looking up from his sensor station, "do you really believe there are aliens watching?" Wilson turned his gaze to the young officer. "I've spent 30 years analyzing those signals, Lieutenant. The ones that suddenly disappeared from our outer solar system one by one. They weren't natural phenomena." Captain Bell nodded in agreement. "The technology we developed from studying those signal patterns is what powers this ship. Someone was watching us. And then they stopped. The question is, why? And more importantly," Wilson added, "what will they do when they realize we've noticed and used their technology against them?" 6 months later, in a hidden facility beneath the lunar surface, Dr. Maya Rivera guided her team through the final adjustments to Earth's newest breakthrough. The chamber housing the quantum entanglement communicator hummed with energy as technicians calibrated its delicate components. "Careful with the alignment," Maya instructed. "We only get one shot at establishing the link with Pathfinder." Her assistant, Dr. Tom Harris, checked the readings on his tablet. "It's still remarkable that we figured this out from those fragments of alien signals. Instantaneous communication across 20 light years." Maya smiled slightly. "Not just figured it out, improved it. Our version uses 30% less energy than what we could determine from their transmission patterns." The truth was something few people outside this facility knew. Humanity's great technological leap forward hadn't come from brilliant innovation alone, but from careful study of the mysterious signals that had surrounded Earth for years. When those signals vanished, Earth's combined scientific community had been given a singular purpose: determine what had been watching them and prepare for either contact or conflict. A soft chime indicated the system was ready. Maya took a deep breath and activated the quantum link. "Pathfinder, this is Luna Base. Do you receive?" After a moment of silence that felt eternal, Admiral Wilson's voice came through with perfect clarity despite being 20 light years away. "Luna Base, this is Pathfinder. We receive you 5 by 5. Quantum entanglement link established and stable." A cheer erupted through the lunar facility. Maya exchanged a smile with Tom before returning to professional mode. "Admiral, we're ready to receive your report." Wilson's voice became grave. "Pathfinder has established our 8th outpost at the edge of what we believe is alien-controlled space. We've detected regular traffic patterns consistent with an advanced civilization. Ships moving faster than light, using a method different from our own." Maya's fingers flew across her console, documenting every word. "Any signs they've detected our presence?" "Negative. Our stealth technology is working perfectly. They seem to have no concept of the approach we're using to mask our energy signatures." There was a pause before Wilson continued. Dr. Rivera, we've recovered something from an abandoned outpost. Some kind of data storage device. We're bringing it back for analysis. How soon? 2 weeks, Earth time. But there's something else you should know. Wilson's voice lowered. Based on our observations, these aliens are organized, highly structured, and they're everywhere. We're looking at what appears to be a vast interstellar empire or confederation. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. And they have no idea we're watching them now. Exactly. The hunters have become the hunted. In the Confederation's Central Planning Division on planet Silaris, junior analyst Kroll was having the worst day of his career. The youngster's scales had turned a sickly green as he stood before Director Nev's desk. You filed the resource extension request for the wrong sector, junior analyst. Nev said, his voice dangerously calm. Sector 9 Theta is the Bendari mining region, not the Terran observation post. I apologize, Director, Kroll stammered. But the Terran observation program was terminated years ago, during the budget reallocation under Council Member Trell. Nev's secondary eyelids closed slowly, a sign of extreme irritation. Yes, but the automated alert system was supposed to remain active. Basic protocols for all potentially developing worlds. There was no budget allocated for maintaining those systems. Director. Kroll pulled up the relevant data on his tablet. After full withdrawal, all systems in the Sol system were powered down. No alerts have been generated because there has been no monitoring. For how long? Nev demanded. Kroll checked the records. 10 standard cycles, Director. Nev's scales darkened with concern. 10 cycles was a significant gap in monitoring, even for a primitive species like humans, while major technological breakthroughs typically took centuries for young civilizations. Exceptions had occurred. File a request for a standard probe to be dispatched to the Sol system, Nev ordered. Low priority, but make sure it happens within the next cycle. Yes, Director. Kroll hesitated. Should I note any specific concerns? Nev considered this question. The humans had been nowhere close to interstellar capability when monitoring ceased. Even with a decade of development, they would still be confined to their solar system, likely struggling with the same primitive chemical rockets. No specific concerns, Nev decided. Just standard procedure for a developing world. We'll update their file once the probe returns data. Little did Nev know that not only would the probe never reach its destination, but when it entered the outer boundary of the Sol system, it would encounter something impossible. A cloaking technology that rendered human outposts completely invisible to Confederation sensors. Admiral Wilson stood in the newly constructed chamber of the United Earth Council. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in tiered seating, their faces solemn as they viewed the holographic display showing humanity's secret expansion. In the 10 years since alien monitoring ceased, Wilson explained, we have established 23 outposts across 11 star systems. Our fleet now consists of 47 FTL-capable vessels, all using stealth technology derived from studying alien communication patterns. President Garcia of the United Earth government leaned forward. And they still don't know we're out there. No, Madam President. Our approach to physics, what Dr. Rivera calls lateral thinking, has given us an advantage. We developed technologies along paths they seem to have never explored. Dr. Rivera stood beside the Admiral. Their technology follows predictable linear improvements. Ours took a completely different direction. They're looking for energy signatures that our ships simply don't produce. Wilson nodded and continued. We now stand at a crossroads. Continue our silent expansion, or reveal ourselves and establish diplomatic contact. The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated the options. Humanity had gone from a planet-bound species to an interstellar presence in just a decade, all while hidden from the vast alien civilization that had once watched them. The moment of decision approached, and somewhere across the stars, the Confederation remained blissfully unaware that their greatest misjudgment was about to be revealed. The Confederation patrol ship Vigilant cruised through the outer reaches of the Arcturus system, its long, sleek hull gleaming under the distant starlight. Captain Mord stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed behind his back, as he watched his crew perform routine scans. Another empty patrol, he muttered to his second-in-command, Officer Len. 3 cycles of border duty, and not a single noteworthy incident. Quiet is good, Captain, Len replied, her voice modulator adjusting to a soothing frequency. The Confederation thrives on predictability. The sensor officer suddenly straightened in her seat. Captain, unusual energy reading at coordinates 227 Mark 43. Mord's boredom vanished instantly. Classification: unknown, sir. It appeared suddenly, as if it just arrived in the system. Mord moved to the sensor station and studied the readings himself. Launch probe drones, full spectrum analysis. The drones shy out from the Vigilance launch tubes, streaking toward the mysterious energy signature. On the main view screen, the crew watched as the drones approached empty space, and then suddenly revealed the outline of a ship as their scanning beams struck an invisible hull. Stealth technology. Len whispered, mandibles clicking in surprise. But our sensors should detect any known cloaking field. The sensor officer worked frantically at her station. The ship appears damaged, Captain. There's a radiation leak in the propulsion system. That's what our sensors detected. Open communication channels, all frequencies, Mord ordered. And bring weapons online. Quietly. After several tense moments, the view screen flickered and showed the interior of the unknown vessel. A bipedal being sat in what appeared to be a command chair. The alien had pale skin, no scales, and only 2 arms. It wore a dark uniform with silver insignia. "This is Captain Jack Reed of the Earth vessel Horizon," the alien said in perfect galactic standard. "We've suffered damage to our drive system and request assistance." Mord felt his scales tighten against his body, a reflexive response to shock. "Earth, the 3rd planet of the Sol system." The human captain nodded. "The same. We're on a peaceful mission of exploration." Mord signaled for the communication to be muted temporarily. "Len, check the Confederation database. What's the current status of Earth's technological development?" Len accessed the central database through their quantum link. Last update shows them as a pre-FTL civilization. Minimal threat potential. No space presence beyond their immediate solar system. She looked up in confusion. This data is from 10 cycles ago. Mord's scales now flushed a deep blue of concern. 10 cycles with no updates. And now they have ships with stealth technology even our sensors can't detect. He gestured for communications to be restored. "Captain Reed, we're dispatching a rescue team to assist with repairs. How long have your people been traveling among the stars?" The human hesitated briefly. "We achieved faster-than-light capability approximately 8 standard years ago. We've established several outposts for scientific research." "Several?" Mord asked carefully. 42 at last count," Reed replied with what Mord would later learn was a human smile. "Across 17 star systems." Mord struggled to maintain his composure. A species that had been using chemical rockets 10 cycles ago now had a multi-system presence. It was unprecedented. "We'll begin rescue operations immediately," Mord said, ending the communication. Len moved closer to her captain. "Sir, Confederation protocols require immediate notification of High Command when encountering a new spacefaring species." "This isn't a new spacefaring species, technically," Mord replied. "This is a categorized civilization that has exceeded expectations." He paused. "Send the alert. Priority 1. On Xylaris, the Confederation capital world." Director Vex stared in disbelief at the report on his screen. After 15 cycles of service in the intelligence division, he had finally achieved the directorship 2 cycles ago. Now, his worst fear from his days as a commander had materialized. "Humans," he whispered, the name tasting bitter in his mouth. "I warned them. I filed the protest." His assistant, a young officer named Turl, shifted uncomfortably. The report from Captain Mord indicates their ship uses an FTL method, unlike anything in our database. And their stealth technology, it doesn't bend light or absorb sensor waves. It somehow exists, adjacent to normal space. Vex closed his eyes briefly. Have we located their homeworld? Yes, Director. It's exactly where it always was. But, Turl hesitated. But what? Our long-range scans show massive orbital construction. Space stations, shipyards, defense platforms. They've industrialized their entire system in just 10 cycles. Vex rose from his desk. Notify the High Council. Emergency session. And find me the archives from the old Earth monitoring station. Already retrieved, sir. Turl handed over a data crystal. The final report contains your protest note and recommendations that were never implemented. And who was responsible for denying those recommendations? Vex asked, though he already knew the answer. Council Member Trell, sir, who is now High Chancellor Trell. Vex felt a cold satisfaction despite the crisis. Excellent. Summon my shuttle. The High Chancellor should hear this news personally. Admiral Wilson stood before the United Earth Council once again, but this time with grave news. The horizon has been discovered by Confederation forces, he announced. Captain Reed followed protocols and presented as non-threatening. The damage to their ship was real, but contained. It served as an explanation for why they were detected. President Garcia frowned. So our stealth technology works. Yes, Madam President. The horizon would have remained undetected if not for the radiation leak. But now that first contact has occurred, we must decide our next move. Dr. Rivera joined the Admiral at the podium. Based on Captain Reed's communication with the Confederation vessel, they seemed genuinely shocked by our advancement. Their database still lists us as a pre-FTL civilization. An advantage we can use, Wilson noted. They don't know the full extent of our capabilities or presence. The defense minister leaned forward. What are our options, Admiral? We can continue the facade of being a newly emerged spacefaring species with limited presence. Or, Wilson paused. Or, prompted the President. Or we reveal our true capabilities and request formal diplomatic relations as equals. The element of surprise is still ours to use. The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued for caution, suggesting humanity should hide its true strength until more was known about the Confederation. Others pushed for immediate revelation, believing a position of strength would ensure better treatment. President Garcia raised her hand for silence. What do we know about their intentions toward us? Dr. Rivera consulted her data. From what we've gathered, the Confederation operates on a hierarchical system based on technological development and territorial control. New species are typically assigned a protectorate status for centuries before gaining limited representation, which would be unacceptable, Wilson added firmly. The President nodded. Prepare a diplomatic team. We will reveal ourselves, but strategically. The Confederation should understand that humanity comes to the galactic stage as an equal, not a subject. As the council session ended, Admiral Wilson and Dr. Rivera walked together through the grand hallway of Earth's United Government building. They never expected us to advance so quickly, Rivera mused. Their mistake was assuming we would follow the same technological path as other species. Wilson smiled slightly. Their bigger mistake was leaving us those breadcrumbs to follow, their communication signals, their energy signatures. By trying to watch us, they showed us exactly what to look for. And by stopping their watch, Rivera added, they gave us the freedom to develop without interference. Wilson looked out through the massive windows at the gleaming spaceport beyond, where dozens of FTL-capable ships prepared for departure to Earth's growing network of colonies and outposts. The Confederation is about to learn a valuable lesson, he said quietly. Never underestimate a species that spends half its history telling stories about meeting aliens. In the distance, the diplomatic vessel Unity began its launch sequence, preparing to carry humanity's first official representatives to meet the Confederation's High Council. and to change the galactic order forever. The Grand Hall of the Confederation capital gleamed with polished stone and ancient metals. High Chancellor Trell stood at the center platform, his purple skin now pale with stress as he addressed the emergency session of the High Council. Behind him, a massive display showed the human diplomatic vessel approaching Celaris. "The delegation from Earth will arrive within the hour," Trell announced. "This situation, while unexpected, is not unprecedented. New spacefaring species emerge regularly. We will follow standard protocols for integration into the Confederation hierarchy." Director Vex stood at the side of the chamber, watching Trell's performance with narrowed eyes. The High Chancellor was attempting to normalize an unprecedented situation. Vex had spent the last 3 days reviewing every scrap of data on human advancement, and nothing about it followed expected patterns. Council Member Drawl, one of the few who had been present during the original Earth assessment 15 cycles ago, raised a gnarled hand. "High Chancellor, perhaps Director Vex should brief us on Intelligence Division's current assessment of Earth's capabilities." Trell's secondary eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of irritation. "Is that necessary? We'll have direct information soon enough." "I believe it is," Drawl insisted, "especially given Director Vex's early warnings about this species." All eyes turned to Vex, who stepped forward with calm precision. He had waited 15 cycles for this moment. "Esteemed Council," he began, "human advancement does not match any developmental model in our historical database. In the 10 cycles since we terminated observation, they have not only achieved faster-than-light travel, but have developed it along theoretical frameworks our scientists considered impossible." He gestured, bringing up a new display showing sensor readings from the human ship. "Their FTL method doesn't create the subspace distortions our technology uses. It somehow folds space itself, a theory our physicists abandoned thousands of cycles ago as unworkable." Murmurs spread through the council as Vex continued. "More concerning is their stealth technology. It doesn't bend light or absorb sensor waves. According to our preliminary analysis, it shifts their vessels partially out of phase with normal spacetime." "Impossible," stated Council Member Laurel, the Confederation's leading scientific authority. "Phase shifting would tear apart any physical structure." "And yet," Vex replied calmly, "the evidence is before you. Furthermore, intercepted communications suggest they have established not just scientific outposts but fully functioning colonies. 42 confirmed settlements across 17 systems, all established in under 8 cycles." High Chancellor Trell stepped forward. "Director Vex seems intent on creating panic. Even if these humans have advanced quickly, they are still a single-system species with limited resources. They will accept protectorate status like all emerging civilizations." Vex's scales darkened slightly, the equivalent of a human smile. "With respect, High Chancellor, I believe you should review the approaching vessel's energy readings." Trell turned to the display, and his confidence visibly faltered. The human chip's power signature exceeded that of a Confederation heavy cruiser, despite being 1/3 the size. "How?" Trell began. "Based on our analysis," Vex answered, "they appear to have developed an energy generation method based on controlled quantum fluctuations, another theoretical dead end our scientists abandoned." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. A species that had been using chemical rockets a decade ago had not only caught up to Confederation technology, but had developed along entirely different paths that might make their technology incompatible with Confederation defenses. "They're here," announced a technician, breaking the silence. The human diplomatic vessel Unity docked with perfect precision at the Celaris orbital station. Admiral Wilson led the delegation, with Dr. Rivera and 5 other human specialists following behind. They wore simple, elegant uniforms without excessive ornamentation, a calculated choice to appear confident but not aggressive. A Confederation reception party waited in the docking bay, led by a tall, purple-skinned official who stepped forward with formal rigidity. "I am High Chancellor Trell of the Galactic Confederation. On behalf of the 523 member species, I welcome you to Xylaris. Wilson nodded respectfully. Admiral James Wilson of Earth, we appreciate your welcome, High Chancellor. This is an historic moment for both our peoples. Trell's secondary eyes narrowed slightly. Indeed, your rapid advancement has been remarkable. The Council is eager to discuss your integration into the Confederation structure. As a newly spacefaring species, you will find our Protectorate program quite beneficial to your development. Wilson exchanged a glance with Dr. Rivera before responding. While we appreciate the offer, High Chancellor, Earth comes to this meeting as a sovereign stellar nation, not a Protectorate applicant. That's not how our system works, Admiral, Trell replied, a hint of condescension entering his voice. All new species begin as protectorates. It's for your own benefit. The galaxy can be dangerous for newcomers. Wilson smiled politely. Perhaps you misunderstand our position. Earth isn't requesting admission. We're proposing a mutual recognition treaty between equals. A low-ranking official approached Trell and whispered something that made the High Chancellor's skin fade to an even lighter purple. What is it? Wilson asked. Trell straightened his already imposing frame. Our sensors have detected 3 more human vessels entering the system. You were permitted 1 diplomatic ship. Actually, Wilson replied, those aren't additional diplomatic vessels. They're our escort. They've been with us the entire journey, maintaining stealth protocols until now as a security measure. Standard procedure for diplomatic missions into unknown territory. A gray-skinned official stepped forward from the Confederation delegation. You had invisible escort ships following your vessel through Confederation space. This is Director Vex of our Intelligence Division, Trell introduced reluctantly. Wilson inclined his head toward Vex. Yes, Director. Standard security protocol. I'm sure you understand the precaution. Vex's expression remained unreadable, but something like respect flickered in his eyes. Most prudent, High Chancellor, perhaps we should move this discussion to the Council chamber. The Grand Hall fell completely silent as Dr. Rivera finished her presentation. The holographic display above the Council table showed technology after technology the humans had developed, each following theoretical paths the Confederation had abandoned centuries or millennia ago. In summary, Rivera concluded, human thinking appears to approach problems from fundamentally different angles than Confederation species. Where your scientists see a dead end, ours might see an opportunity. This cognitive divergence explains our rapid development once we understood the basic principles we discovered from studying your monitoring signals. You knew we were watching you. Council member Laurel asked, genuinely curious. We detected your observation platforms years before you shut them down. Wilson confirmed. We couldn't understand the technology then, but we gathered enormous amounts of data. When the signals stopped, we realized we had been given an opportunity. Director Vex stepped forward. You used our own monitoring technology against us. We learned from it, Wilson corrected, and improved upon it. High Chancellor Trell had remained silent through most of the presentation, but now he spoke. Even with these advancements, Earth is still one planet with limited resources. The Confederation spans thousands of worlds across 3 galactic arms. Wilson nodded in acknowledgement. Which is why we come in peace, seeking cooperation rather than conflict. However, there's one more thing you should know. He gestured to Dr. Rivera, who activated the final part of their presentation. The hologram shifted to show 3 distinct alien species, none of which were represented in the Council chamber. During our exploration, we encountered these 3 species in systems your star charts marked as uninhabited. They had been overlooked by your survey teams, possibly because their technological signatures didn't match your expected patterns. Shocked murmurs filled the chamber. Missing 3 spacefaring species was an unprecedented failure of Confederation exploration protocols. We've established peaceful relations with all 3, Wilson continued. They've formed their own coalition, which now has a mutual defense treaty with Earth. The implications were clear. Earth might be one planet, but it was no longer alone. and the Confederation's assumption of complete galactic knowledge had been shattered in a single moment. Director Vex moved to stand beside High Chancellor Trell. For the first time in the meeting, Vex allowed himself a visible reaction, one that humans would recognize as a smile. "I believe," Vex said quietly to Trell, "this would be the moment to reconsider our assessment of Earth's threat potential." The central garden of Celaris bloomed with plants from hundreds of worlds. Admiral Wilson walked slowly beside Director Vex, both leaders taking a rare moment away from the intense negotiations that had stretched over 3 weeks. "Your proposal is causing quite the stir, Admiral," Vex said, his gray scales catching the light of Celaris's twin suns. "A galactic alliance instead of the Confederation. Equal representation regardless of technological development. Many elder species find these ideas disturbing." Wilson stopped beside a fountain where water flowed upward instead of down, one of the many subtle displays of Confederation technological prowess designed to impress visitors. "Change is always disturbing to those who benefit from the current system," Wilson replied. "But your own history shows the weakness of the Confederation model. 3 overlooked species, countless abandoned technological paths, a rigid hierarchy that stifles innovation." Vex's inner eyelids blinked slowly. "You misunderstand, Admiral. I find your proposal intriguing, not disturbing. But then, I've spent my career being disturbed by things others ignored." Wilson smiled, like a primitive species that told stories about space travel they couldn't possibly achieve. "Precisely." Vex gestured to a bench carved from a single crystal, inviting Wilson to sit. "Tell me honestly, how did humans advance so quickly? Even with the data you gathered from our monitoring stations, the leap from chemical rockets to your current technology is unprecedented." Wilson considered his answer carefully. The truth was both simple and complex. "Imagination," he finally said. "Humans have always been dreamers. For thousands of years before we had the technology, we told stories about traveling to the stars. We imagined meeting aliens, building faster-than-light ships, creating new worlds. When we found evidence that aliens were real, your monitoring signals, it wasn't a shock. It was confirmation of what we had always believed. But the technical challenges were approached differently," Wilson finished. "Your scientists follow logical progressions. If Path A leads to a dead end, they abandon it entirely. Humans are more stubborn. We'll try Path A from 100 different angles before giving up. And sometimes, that 100th attempt breaks through." Vex nodded slowly. "A cognitive difference. Fascinating." He paused. "High Chancellor Trell will never support your alliance proposal. Too much power would be lost by the elder species. And you. I warned about Earth's potential 15 cycles ago. No one listened." Vex's scales darkened slightly, the equivalent of a smile. "I find it satisfying to be proven right." The Grand Council chamber was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from all 523 Confederation member species crowded the tiered seating, while diplomatic teams from Earth and the 3 newly discovered species, the Naren, the Volsci, and the Tellarites, stood at the center. The tension in the room was palpable. High Chancellor Trell took the elevated podium, his purple skin now a deep, troubled shade. "This emergency session of the High Council will now decide on the proposed Galactic Alliance Charter. The proposal requires a 2/3 majority to pass." Dr. Rivera stood beside representatives from each of the 3 new species. Over the weeks of negotiation, they had formed a unified front, their combined knowledge of technologies overlooked by the Confederation, creating a powerful bargaining position. Trell continued, his voice heavy with reluctance. "The terms include equal representation for all spacefaring species regardless of technological tier or territorial holdings, shared access to scientific discoveries, and a mutual defense pact." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. For many of the elder species who had enjoyed privileged positions for thousands of cycles, the proposal threatened their status. For younger, less developed species who had lived under protectorate restrictions, It offered unprecedented opportunity. Council Member Droll, one of the oldest members, raised his hand. Before we vote, I wish to address the council. Trell nodded permission, his secondary eyes narrowed with suspicion. Droll had been showing troubling signs of supporting the humans. The ancient counselor rose slowly. I have served on this council for 142 cycles. I have seen the Confederation expand, fight wars, and absorb new species. But never have I seen us so thoroughly surprised as we have been by humanity. He gestured toward the Earth delegation. These beings have shown us the flaw in our system. Our assumption that there is only one path of technological advancement, one correct way to approach the universe. By shutting down our observation of Earth to save resources, we blinded ourselves to an entirely different way of thinking. Droll turned to face the full council. I have reviewed Director Vex's original assessment from 15 cycles ago. He warned us then that humans think differently. We ignored him because it didn't fit our models. That mistake nearly cost us our position in the galaxy. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even Trell seemed unable to interrupt the elder's speech. I vote in favor of the Alliance, Droll concluded. Not because humans have forced our hand with their technological surprises, but because their proposal offers something our Confederation has lost: adaptation, flexibility, and the wisdom to recognize different paths to the same stars. 3 days later, Admiral Wilson and Director Vex stood on the observation deck of the orbital station, watching as ships from dozens of worlds moved into formation for the signing ceremony. The vote had been close, nearer to the 2/3 requirement than anyone had predicted, but the Alliance Charter had passed. 37% of Confederation species voted against the Alliance. Vex noted, "They will not accept this change easily." Wilson nodded. Change never comes without resistance, but more than 60% saw the opportunity in cooperation. Because humans demonstrated technologies that could potentially threaten Confederation dominance, Vex pointed out. Fear is a powerful motivator. As is hope, Wilson countered. Many younger species voted for the Alliance because it offers them a voice they never had in the Confederation. Below them, on Xilaris itself, construction had already begun on the new Alliance headquarters, a symbolic placement on the former Confederation capital world. There's still one question you haven't answered, Admiral, Vex said, turning to face Wilson directly. During your expansion, before we discovered you, you found evidence of our military capabilities, our defensive systems, our weaknesses. You could have struck first, established dominance through force. Why didn't you? Wilson smiled. Another human trait, Director. For all our stories about meeting aliens, most of them end with cooperation, not conquest. We'd rather build something together than rule alone. Vex considered this, an admirable sentiment. I hope it proves sustainable. That's why I've recommended you for the position of Alliance Security Director, Wilson revealed. Someone needs to keep a careful eye on all of us, humans included. For the first time, Vex showed genuine surprise. You trust me with such responsibility. After I spent years monitoring your world. Because of it, Wilson answered. You saw our potential when everyone else dismissed us. That kind of foresight will be valuable in the Alliance. As they spoke, a sleek vessel approached the station, the first official diplomatic ship from the Volsci, one of the species humans had discovered. Behind it came ships from worlds that had been Confederation protectorates for centuries, now full Alliance members. The irony isn't lost on me, Vex said quietly. By shutting down communication with Earth, we created the very conditions that allowed you to surpass our expectations. A single budget decision changed the galaxy forever. Wilson watched as the ships assembled, representing a new beginning for thousands of worlds. The greatest miscalculations often have the most profound consequences. On the main viewing screen, the newly elected Alliance Council appeared, a diverse group including humans, former Confederation leaders, and representatives from species that had been overlooked or underestimated. Their first unanimous act had been simple but profound. A galaxy-wide declaration that no developing world would ever again be abandoned to isolation simply to save resources. As the signing ceremony began, Wilson couldn't help but smile at the final line of the Alliance Charter, words suggested by Dr. Rivera, but embraced by representatives from hundreds of worlds. United in diversity, stronger through difference, we reach for the stars together. The moment the Confederation realized Earth's true potential had become the moment the galaxy found a new path forward, one where being different wasn't a weakness to overcome, but a strength to be celebrated.